Welcome to Alienating the Audience, a show that doesn't just enjoy binging sci-fi and speculative fiction, but actively looks for ways to glom metaphysics onto it. Today, we're going to dive into the Netflix program Black Mirror, and we're going to tackle it from an odd angle: relentless optimism and self-improvement. Grab your most suspicious robot, and let's go! I am joined today by Mike Kaplan, and I'm excited about that, and I will tell you why, because I think we're all hunting for things to watch and listen to right now. So we get kind of a double whammy today, because Mike and I are going to be talking about Black Mirror, but at the same time, Mike also has a new comedy album out. So you can either go binge watch Black Mirror, or you can binge Mike's comedy album, and I would recommend both. Mike, what is your comedy album?
It's called AKA. And it is based on some comedy that I've been working on for the last several years. I brought a show to the Edinburgh Fringe Fest for the first time.
Nice.
Called All Killing Aside was the name of the show then. We have shortened it to AKA, which could stand for All Killing Aside. The show is basically it's anti-killing, anti-murdering, pro-kindness in general. But we decided to, in these days...
This is a crazy stance for you to take, man. What a way to put your neck out.
I mean, like, I am a hero, and yes, there's not a lot of people talking about this. Yeah. But we decided that, you know, given the state of affairs in the world today, just without context, having killing in the title, all killing aside, now why don't we listen to this? But so yeah, it's called AKA, which also is short for also known as. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's an hour of comedy. It's my maybe fourth or fifth recorded stand-up album, and it's the one that I feel like is I'm the happiest with. I feel like it's in ways the best, the most cohesive, which is hope the way that you want it to be is that you get better, that you get more experienced, and that it manifests in some way. And so I'm very happy with this album. It's I'm proud of it, and I'm excited for people to be able to listen to it.
And I neglected to mention it, but my very intelligent listenership has no doubt surmised that you are in fact a stand-up comedian. I want to go ahead and make that clear. You do it for a living. You tell jokes. You are funny.
It's true. I appreciate your letting everyone know, because here's the thing, that sometimes comedians are funny not on stage as well, and that will be, you know, it's not required. It's not part of the, you know, some people are like, tell me a joke, and you know, well then pay me a money.
I agree. And yeah, that's I've actually done that to people before, where because I'm doing far less stand up than you. However, like I'm also a comedian, and I've had people at parties be like, tell me a joke, and I'm like, give me $5. I'm not like if I had a cello, you wouldn't like ask me to get my cello out of my trunk. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, I'm sure. I wonder how often Yo-Yo Ma has had people say, "Oh, you're a cello. Play me a cello."
Yeah, play me a cello. You're not even using the right words. You and I were spitballing ideas around, and we settled on Black Mirror as a good topic to really jump into. I have come around on Black Mirror to where now I am a Black Mirror enthusiast. I initially hated Black Mirror. The first year it was out, I watched first of all, I think it was a strategic error to begin with the episode, the national anthem, where I'm going to say we can spoil stuff in this one. Everything's been out long enough. I think it's okay, and since these are episodic and we're not ruining one giant work, it's okay for us to spoil things. So in the national anthem. Basically the equivalent of a princess. Oh my gosh, I went completely. Kate Middleton. Basically, the Kate Middleton equivalent of the world has been kidnapped by a torturous weirdo, and he's going to murder the princess unless the prime minister has sex with a pig on national television, and he does. And it wasn't so much that I'm prudish, although apparently there is a little bit of prudishness to me that I was hitherto unaware of. The problem I had is I watched that, and I watched 2 or 3 episodes following that, and I felt like every single episode of Black Mirror ended with like pulling the camera over to a host who points at the camera and goes, don't you feel like a piece of shit? And I was like, why are you making me feel bad? I didn't even when naked pictures of Jennifer Lawrence leaked, I wasn't checking those out either. I'm very confident I wouldn't watch the Prime Minister have sex with a pig. So I initially didn't like it. I thought it was so negative and so cynical. However, I eventually kind of brain shifted to where I went, all right, I'm not going to view this as like just kind of like straight up sci-fi entertainment. I'm going to view this as satire. And I think as satire, not necessarily funny satire, but as satire itself of just investigating the situation around us, I think it's very good and very creative and very effective.
Yeah, I feel like at the very end of that first episode, when I was kind of like the whole time, like, how are they going to get out of this? Like, how are they going to save the day? How is it going to have a happy ending?
Right.
And then it doesn't. And I didn't even really know that it was episodic, like the Twilight Zone. Like every episode would be, you know, a new world with new characters, essentially. Like I thought, I'm like, what's going to happen in the next episode? Like what happens after this guy did this thing?
This is a lot of character development really up front. Like is the rest of this just dealing with the pig sex? Does the pig come back as, you know, this assistant prime minister?
So I want to take a slight detour to get back to this, but like the way that I engage with art, you know, movies, TV shows, books, like stories, has really changed throughout my life, and I think it's sort of represented by, or I can like a thing that helps me contextualize it is like I had a girlfriend a few years ago who she particularly liked like when a story, a movie ended with ambiguity. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I thought of myself as, like my mother, the opposite. I'm like, I like things to be clear. I like it to be done, to know, like, isn't there enough ambiguity in life? Can't art at least offer us some kind of answers? Can't art not just ask questions? Can't art not just, mimic life? Can't art just, can't art be a different thing than life? Can't art not just be part of life? And so I took in this former partner of mine's like view, and I was like, oh, like I guess when something ends ambiguously, I can imagine both things. I can think about it however I want to, be like, oh, I wish that person hadn't died. I wish this hadn't happened. Well, it didn't. It was fiction. It was presented to me. And so you can, especially when it's not real, when it's not out of our reality, we can be like, oh no, I don't think that's not how I would do it, or that's not how it is, or that's not how it's going to be. So I also think, like you, made a brain shift like with Black Mirror. Happy to return to the topic at hand. If you thought I would never come back, just floating away in space.
No, the episode's about the good wife and your ex-girlfriend. You're nailing this.
And so the point is, every time, a Black Mirror episode ends like horrifyingly, or presents the world in a way that like you said, like if they were like, this is how it is, you'd be like, oh god, this is not what I want it to be. But but viewed as satire, viewed as like with a wink of like, what if, or like what if slightly more, what if like this was just tweaked and then played out to its fullest horrific nature. No,
true, because and I think that's the use of ambiguity is much better in a satirical setting than it is in a character-based show. This isn't a character-based show. This is a satire. It's a thought experiment show. It's most similar to The Twilight Zone or to Outer Limits. And I love The Twilight Zone, but it would take me 10 seconds to remember the names of characters in The Twilight Zone. I don't remember the name of William Shatner in Terror at 20,000 Feet. I just remembered him as William Shatner, right?
Sure.
I remember what the episodes are about. I don't remember the characters, because they don't spend a huge amount of time developing the characters, because the characters are only going to be there for an episode. They and the plot are there to make us investigate something. And it seems to me that Black Mirror is far more focused than The Twilight Zone is. The Twilight Zone is it wanted to investigate society, and it wanted to investigate a lot of cultural issues that were pertinent to the 60s and the Cold War, whereas Black Mirror is focused on technology. That's why it's called Black Mirror, because when you turn off your smartphone, you are looking into a black mirror. You're looking into a dark reflective surface, and we are in turn invited by Black Mirror to take a look at ourselves through this medium. And so I don't think you have to have the same character development or plot, but you do have these questions. And that I think is very good satire. Like a lot of it has to do with social media. A lot of it has to do with the role of technology and our dependency on it, how it can go poorly, that kind of thing. Are there any particular themes that you've seen that like grabbed you, any particular episodes?
Yeah, first I do want to say you are the first person to really spell out to me that Black Mirror, like when you're looking at, a phone or a tablet,
right, or,
an electronic surface turned off, that is like literally as close to a Black Mirror as possible. Like I had certainly understood the theme and the idea that, it's a dark, a dark look
right.
at our own reality. Like clearly there are many meanings potentially there, but I just want to say that I like that in today's day and age, like there are studies showing how being on your phone more can produce more anxiety.
Right.
And so having your phone on, having it be light is actually not producing like all the light that could exist within. And in fact, you could create more light and peace and warmth and comfort within oneself by turning your phone into a Black Mirror. So it could actually be like a recommendation like that. Oh no,
right,
the mirror is black. Oh, if the mirror is black, that means, like cold hands, warm heart, Black Mirror, warm insides.
Right. No, that's, and I very much agree with that sentiment. Granted, you and I are recording this under house arrest due to pandemic conditions, where the entirety of our social life, at least for me, is coming through, my smartphone and my computer. However, I agree with the sentiment overall very much. I think a lot of the contentedness and joy you get in life come from living in the moment and being present. And our technology, while itself being morally neutral, has such a capacity to yank you away from wherever you are in the moment and withdrawing you. And there was a tweet I read a few years ago that I loved that said, I would like to go back in time and tell myself in high school, in the future, you will carry in your pocket a glass square which brings you sadness. I was like, that's fairly accurate, because it's like, I know a lot of people that they wake up and they immediately get on Twitter to find out what they're enraged about that day. And it's like, this is an odd way to live life, of like, I can't do anything about it, but I do want to get really angry and sad. It's like, yeah, all right, good for you, I guess. I think that the takeaway for me from Black Mirror as a whole, and there's a lot of different sub-themes to it. The big one is, I think, technology can go wrong. They don't typically, I don't feel like it's a Luddite program, however. I don't think that they ever really take the stance that technology is inherently evil. Maybe Metalhead, the one where the robot dogs are killing everybody. That
might be my least favorite episode. Yeah. I feel like it did, like so many of them are so textured and have so many layers and levels. And I feel like that one, like I don't like to, I only like to criticize the things that I love, and I'm like, that is like maybe the only episode that made me feel bad in a way that maybe, I don't know if it was intended, but like all the other times that I feel bad, I'm like, ooh yeah, that's the way they want me to feel bad.
Right. Yeah.
But this one I'm just like concerned.
No, I agree with you, because I think there are, most of the episodes you don't leave with a happy feeling. Most of the episodes you leave with like oh no, we done made a wrong turn. We need to read some stuff and get our heads together, right? I agree with you on that. I think that one, Metalhead, it didn't make me sad, but I didn't feel like there was much of a point to it, because the takeaway of like, robots might kill us has been done before. The spin that they might have put on it is, I think in retrospect, I think the robot dogs in Metalhead are like anti-shoplifting devices that have gone so far afield of their remit to just openly kill human beings to stop them from shoplifting that it's kind of anti-materialist, anti-consumer, but that's still like a very subtle way of, basically it's just robots terrorizing people.
I like it better now, because it's true. You can't shoplift if you're dead.
That's true. Yep, you're right. It's kind of the paperclip problem, right? Like the paperclip thought experiment with AI is oftentimes, if you had super intelligent AI and its goal was to make paper clips, it would eventually like kill everyone on the planet to like ensure that it had iron ores necessary to build paper clips, and it would, disassemble the Eiffel Tower to make paper clips and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a paperclip thing, but I agree with you. The moral takeaway from it is very limited.
What robots do, if they learn to do a thing and then they keep doing that thing and they're like, oh, maximize that thing, is a similar thing to what maybe corporations do. Like, oh, we want to maximize money, so keep making money. Even who cares what the cost is? Like, we're making the money. Oh, what about the human life? Well, yeah, that's the corporation is a life like a human, so we're gaining that life, and it's something that I think human beings as well are like capable of, and unfortunately, without enough reflection, like, not pointing any fingers anywhere but myself as well. Like, I just read this book of Zen cartoons, like illustrated teachings of various Zen masters or Zen students, Zen teachers, whoever they are. And one of them talks about a miser who, like, he just keeps his money, doesn't use it for anything except for himself, just holds onto it. And then he's visited by a Zen master who then shows him like a closed fist and says, if you always kept your hand in a closed fist, like what would you call that? And be like, well, that would be a deformity. And he's like, and if you always kept your hand straight out and open palm, what would that be? He's like, that would also be a deformity. And so that's the thing that helped provide some measure of enlightening to this guy. Be like, oh, it's, to keep things, closed all the time completely, that extreme isn't helpful to anyone. And to keep it the other way is not so it's the, Buddhism is a lot about the middle path. Yeah. And so the idea of like, of course it makes sense to strive to have enough food, enough money, enough, clothing, and care for ourselves, in these times and all times. And then, but also if you have, there's studies that show if you have above a certain amount, it doesn't add to your happiness. Right. It only starts, mo money, mo problems, mo money, no problems. Yeah, why not?
Mo money, mo problems is the consensus of behavioral economics. That is the general takeaway when you get into, caste substated things.
And so it's necessary for like on a personal level up to the global level for there like to not just toggle a switch and be like, this is the setting that we need to keep it on. Like it is required and desired. It's like important. We have to and we get to like always be like calculating and helping and figuring out how, like, what do I do to make myself be the calmest, the happiest, the most productive, the most helpful to others on the personal level, on the local level, on the the political level, the geopolitical entity, like, and it's easier for us to just be like, okay, let me just leave that set for a while. And so I do feel like that is maybe what's going on or what it's talking about now. I really like in that dog episode where it's just like they set something, they made a setting and then they're like, run with it. And yeah, perhaps that is like for Black Mirror, one of the more simplistic, from start to end point. But for them to only have one of those, where sincerely, that's the only one that I can think of that wasn't as like complex and nuanced and poignant as so many of the others, which can I also mention just I love like that there's more than two, but I remember like two specific ones that are like so exceptional in that they're like happy,
right?
Like that they
they're just pleasant. The San Junipero where there's like basically lesbian cybernetic heaven. That was just so pleasant.
And Hang the DJ was also one that it's so nice to have it be like, you don't know what's happening. And then ultimately you do. And it's not a horrifying endpoint.
They're the only, like, I'd say the USS Callister is also a happy ending one, although it's kind of, but the two that you just mentioned, I think are the only examples of techno-optimism in the entire series. The rest of it's very, very skeptical of where we're going. But I want to go back a little bit. You brought up Zen. I think Buddhism's actually a very good lens to interpret this with, because I am very much translating Buddhism through my own mind and experiences right now. But it seems to me that the Buddha observed people want stuff to stay the same, and it doesn't. And that really irritates people. And if you can be okay with things changing, you will be happier than if you're trying to hold on to everything and maintain it as it is. And we're living in a time right now that has very rapid technological progress. There's a lot of background anxiety from that of like, wait, but what? Like, what is this thing? FaceTime? Like that kind of, all of that's happening. And I think that Black Mirror really plunges into that of innovation is good, but change is often bad, or technology is profound, but humanity remains with all of the foibles and problems we have. And so we're going to oftentimes amplify the things we're dealing with as we go through these changes.
Yeah, I think there's a thing from the Talmud that I like where a rabbi says, like, in each of two pockets, I keep one piece of paper. One of them says, we are nothing but ash and dust. And the other one says, this world was created for you. And that there are these, seemingly contradictory ideas that, depending on your perspective, at one moment you might need to hear one, at another you might need to hear the other. And there's a Niels Bohr quote that I like that hopefully this will all tie together and be important that I'm saying them all. But Niels Bohr said, the opposite of a small truth is a lie, but the opposite of a profound truth is often another profound truth. And so there are things that, like thinking about yourself, thinking about others, there are things that could be seemingly opposites that are also both true to focus on. And one specifically that I bring up now for the reason that I said all that, I think, is there are people who are like, back in my day, it was better. Yeah. But like also back in my day, we didn't have the technological advances, that allow me to, FaceTime with my family, that's half a world away. Like that things come from like the idea that technology itself, of course, like does not, is it good? Is it bad? It is right. Like there is progress. There is change.
I do this, and I do a political podcast as well. And I am constantly frustrated by binary thinking in modern culture. There's this I call it gutter thinking. There's this idea of like, there's two teams, one of them's evil, one of them's good. And it's my job to constantly affirm to everyone around me that I'm on the good team and how much evil the other team is. I just don't think that way. And a lot of the time I can have a conversation with someone where I'm aware that it's not so much that we are in direct conflict, it's that we have different viewpoints that we're using to look at a situation. We might have different solutions to a situation. Niels Bohr's quote is great in that regard, because rather than engendering a worldview in which if I believe something and you do not, you must believe the opposite and it must be wrong. It could be that we actually both have good insights onto something that are both useful. And I think that's a very productive way of looking at things. But before we completely cat at each other, I will gently tug us back to Black Mirror for a moment. I want to add a couple of episodes that I didn't like to your list. So you brought up Metalhead. I'm going to add two that I thought missed the mark, and those are Crocodile and Shut Up and Dance. And so Crocodile is a just emotionally torturous episode in which a woman and her boyfriend in their youth accidentally do a hit and run and kill a guy and hide the body. And the boyfriend eventually calls her up and now she's now married. She has kids, and he says, I read a newspaper article that the widow of the man that we accidentally killed is still waiting for him. I'm going to tell her I have to. And she, not wanting to have her life come crashing down, murders this guy, and it leads to a whole spiral of killings to try and cover up the original cover up. The tech element of it is that in that particular episode, there is a technology which exists which allows you to view other people's memories and can be useful in terms of something quotidian like an insurance claim, but also like in an interrogative sense. I didn't like that episode because I didn't think that it really asked any questions about us or society. It was just like kind of like murder porn. It was murder porn with interesting technology, but I didn't think that there was a satire element to it.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, it's interesting now, like, having watched a number of the episodes, like, years ago and over, like, not as recently as current. I had this experience. Another sort of slightly wandering analogy, like when I was a teenager, there was like a song by the Cardigans, like their popular song that I didn't like. Everyone, it was playing all the time. People liked it a lot. I didn't love it. it wasn't my favorite song. But then I remember, like, 10 years later, 20 years later, it came on the radio and I was like, oh, this song. And I had like a distinct experience of being like, pleasure at the nostalgia of being like, I remember this song. Like, what a wonderful feeling this is. Even, and then a second later, I was like, oh, I didn't like this song. But I'm like, but now I'm enjoying the memory of the song. And now, like, I can't.
That's how I feel about Hootie and the Blowfish. I'm just like,
sure.
I wasn't really super into Hootie, but now when I hear it, I'm like, high school.
And of course, there are, I think, scientific reasons. The idea that when your brain is, in its teenage years, it is literally, developing into like the not finished form, but, they say at age 25-ish, somewhere around there is when it stops developing, quote unquote. But, you had a child's brain, you needed different foods. Like it's another analogy is like, I didn't like the taste of certain vegetables as a kid. Now I do like the taste of those vegetables. Did the vegetable change taste? Like, no, I changed, and I can't even I can remember that I was different, but I can't remember how I was different. I can't like bite into a tomato and be like, ew, like I used to be. I mean, unless I'm just pretending. And so similarly to that song, like I don't remember how I first experienced that episode, but I certainly remember the facts of it, and I also remember like your description of it like rings true to me. So I have now both within me the Niels Bohr style Great Truth opposites of being like, yeah, your assessment of that episode is right on. I'm not a big fan of murder porn or the idea that like, oh, if this could happen, then probably a lot of people would murder each other, like as far as the message and the questions. And also I do have like this joy filling me of the simple memory of why I'm like, oh, I'm remembering that, and I'm sharing this communal experience with my friend who's remembering it, even though he's remembering it less than fondly.
Good. Well, thanks, Black Mirror. We're able to bond through this. I'll give him props to that. I'll give one more that I didn't like it because I'd rather focus on the positive stuff. I like the point of the episode is not just to rag on it, despite the fact that I kicked it off with the pig sex episode. There is a lot of stuff that I really enjoyed it. The other one that I did not think had a good satirical takeaway was Shut Up and Dance. This is, I think, the only episode which really requires no technological leap to it. There's nothing in it that is out with our current technological capacity. A young man in his early to mid-teen years looks at some porn on the internet, pleasures himself, and he realizes it's captured on camera. And hackers get this footage and compel him to do all sorts of horrible things, along with a number of other people who are likewise being blackmailed for a variety of things they did. And I felt like maybe the takeaway is just like, look how by the gonads technology can get us. You can be blackmailed, but I didn't really feel like it asked us to investigate ourselves, other than we are reliant on technology, and yes, we can be blackmailed. But I didn't think that it had like I hadn't thought about things that way message.
Yeah, in my real life, maybe I think while I was in England once, so it might have been when I was there in the UK for Edinburgh a couple of years ago, or possibly a little later because I went back. But I remember getting an email from someone that was like, "We have your password, and we have used the video camera capacity on your laptop to videotape you while you were like looking at certain pornography, and Tentacle so porn. Send money here." And I was like, "Oh no, they do have like they had like a password that I had used once. They said what it was, and I was like, oh god." And then I looked up, or a friend helped me be like, "Oh yeah, that's a scam. Don't send anyone any money. They don't have any video."
I guess it does touch on like a deep societal angst, I think, that is there of like, what if we all like, like I watched a porn one time. I don't want that, publicly. I don't want my reactions to it to be online. I get it. Let me throw a couple more episodes at you that I think are good.
Please.
So let's talk about FOMO for a second, because I think social media very much factors into that. I think you and I are both in our 30s, and so we probably grew up, or I'm assuming that you're roughly my age. I'm in my mid 30s. Either way, you probably forget. You've got gray hair. If you're like 22, I'm really sorry, Mike. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but I did not have social media when I was in high school. It did not exist, and Facebook did not come out until I was a sophomore in college, and it didn't have the whole-scale impact the first couple of years it was in existence. It was a novelty rather than a daily feature of my life. So when I was in high school, if we didn't get invited to a party, we didn't know about it. Or maybe we found out about it. We found out like a week later. We didn't care. We didn't feel like we were being purposely excluded. Whereas people that I speak to that grew up with Facebook in high school, I feel like are a little bit shell-shocked from the experience, because they were constantly aware of everything that they weren't going to. Even if they had an invitation to everything, they knew what they were missing out on in a way that I never had to process. And I think Black Mirror is very good at that. They have several episodes where they critique social media. The one that I think got a lot of critical acclaim, and justly so, was Nosedive, which is the one with is it Bryce Dallas Howard, the redhead in it, I believe, is the daughter of Ron Howard. But the premise of the episode is that in the not too distant future, we all have basically like an Uber, like, you know how Uber drivers can give you a score and vice versa. We all have that, and it is like sort of a parallel currency in our lives that also dictates like where we get to sit on the airplane, which houses we can go into. It's like a very, very important social ranking system that businesses and presumably the law key off of. And it's all based on how well I rate you as a person, and how delightful you are on social media. And it kind of is this quantifying of sort of the credit card scores of life, and was great at tapping into that, like, oh my God, this would be a horrible world to live in.
Yeah, I think there was. Did you ever watch the show Community?
Yeah.
I think there was an episode of that where
right, yeah. Is it like
happened as well?
Yeah. Greg Heidecker and Eric are in that episode. That's the one where they have like 5 beans, or there's like 5 bean scores. There's like 1 to 5, and like by the end of it, it's completely turned into this weird Logan's Run society that's entirely stratified based on what your score level is. Yeah,
and I mean, of course, with respect to that or the Black Mirror episode, like today's day and age is not like literally like that, but you know, there are businesses that have Yelp reviews and might hire people, or you know, there's fake Amazon reviews out there, because how highly rated you are like can impact how many people do see that you are selling things.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I think you've got sort of 2 different variants of that particular sort of fear of review, we might call it, which I think that exists right now. Like I know authors who have, an author will criticize someone in an unrelated field. I don't know. They'll say something about them that's unflattering on social media. That person will come around and go, I'm going to give your book 0 stars unless you take back that thing. Even though they haven't read the book, they want to try and hold that person hostage. And I know for like, people that are lightning rods within media, this is a routine phenomenon. We're just like, depending on whether you like or hate Donald Trump, the people that like or hate Donald Trump will storm your book reviews or your Yelp restaurant or whatever and try and ruin you, because of course the goal should be to destroy anyone with whom we have a disagreement. So there's that kind of, maybe we would call that the capitalist variant or the market variant. I don't know, where it's not a state top-down thing. It's rather an accumulation of private actors, which is the one that's explored in Black Mirror. However, there's also like the statist Orwellian equivalent in the works right now in China, where they've been implementing a system the last 4 to 6 years, but I think it's now kind of coming online. I don't remember exactly where it is, where the Chinese government, which is doing a bang-up job based on all the news I've been reading here lately, they assign citizens like citizen scores based on what they're reading, who they associate with, if they've had any criminal problems in the past, if they have a drinking problem, if they're a Uyghur, really hurts you if you're Muslim. And they've got like this whole system, and you, depending on if you're like, say you're married to a disgraced party official, you don't get to fly anymore because your social ranking plummets. Wow. And it's terrifying. I mean, it's like having imagine if your credit card score were dictated to you by the federal government, and also it like everything else in your life was affected by that, it would be a really bad scenario. And it kind of exists right now.
I don't want to imagine that. Thank you.
Yeah.
My friend Liz Mealy is a comedian who was telling me that recently she's had some successes with videos on YouTube and on Instagram, IGTV. So she puts jokes on there, and she had one joke about how women aren't funny, like the concept of female comedians, and it got a lot of attention, a lot of views, a lot of responses. Some of the responses positive and some of the responses negative, but she told me that the algorithm, one of the reasons that it was so successful is that every person who was commenting saying this is bad or I don't like women or women aren't funny, those all added a point to the total of engagement. Like she was being rewarded as it should be. I mean, I think that's like a boon, a benefit of the way that system works is that, and that speaks to like me on sort of a personal like heart level as well, because I want to spend my time engaging positively with the things that I enjoy much more than the reverse. And I always, if somebody doesn't like my stuff, I'm like, well, then don't. Why? For your own benefit, don't spend time with it.
Yeah, no, I very much agree with you on that. I'm kind of. I think there's a difference between I want to effect positive change and I am angry at injustice I see, which is a very good position to be in. That's very different than I actively wish to wallow in things that enrage me. And I'm like, unless that is unless that has a positive effect on your life or somebody else's, why would you want to focus on the things which you hate and drive you crazy? Why wouldn't you, to get back to Buddhism, why wouldn't you try and engage in equanimity and have be compassionate without at the same time being emotionally roiled by those things which are causing problems for you? I'll add a ray of hope to the rating system as well. When I was a television writer, there was a nascent social media platform that we covered that I thought was a horrible idea. And it was exactly what we're talking about with the Black Mirror episode. It was a social media ranking system. I don't remember what it was called, but the idea was we would all eventually be on it, and you would just rate people as human beings. You would rate them on a 1 to 5 scale. And I remembered reading that prior to the Black Mirror episode and going, I do not like this. I do not want to have a person credit score. That is not something I'm interested in doing. I'm not going to get in on this system. I'm going to refuse to enfranchise myself into it. And apparently most people felt the exact same way, because they kind of did it for like a year, and it didn't have enough people interested in it. It eventually withered and went kaput, and good for that.
Yeah. I also feel that like sometimes I know that there are people who make their living as like movie critics, say, and they'll watch all the movies and then write reviews whether they like the movie or not. But my hope would be for like, if I could design the system, I'd be like, only review the ones that you like. And then you could see by the aggregate of like, well, this movie got a lot of reviews. That means a lot of people liked it. And if it got only a few reviews, that means only a few people liked it. But you can then see, who liked it. Why did they like it? Like, what are the few things being said about it? I mean, and I'm not going to change the whole system, but I can do it for myself. So I'll just in this moment say, I review you as a person who doesn't want people to be reviewed, as a positive person. I review this, as opposed to focusing on like, why are people being the other way? Why are people complaining? Why am I complaining about those people? I love those people. I want those people to have full, rich, rewarding lives full of things that they love engaging with. And maybe they do love engaging hatefully. But I hope for us all to, I mean, another Buddhist thing, I just finished this book by Pema Chodron called Becoming Bodhisattvas, where she analyzes the writings of Shantideva. And from there, he talks about like the goal of enlightenment being not for one's own benefit, but to literally benefit everyone else. Like the goal of enlightenment is that all people are able to be enlightened. All beings can. So if you look at somebody, even your quote unquote enemy, like. I wish I knew whose joke this is, because it spoke to me so much. Years ago, I was in South Carolina, and a comedian told a joke that was basically like, he said, a friend of mine said, I wish that chocolate cake tasted like shit. It's like, why? He's like, because it's so fattening and I don't want to eat it. And he's like, well, why don't you just wish for it to be healthy? Like, while you're wishing. And so I love it so much. And a friend of mine named Ramin Nazer, whose work I love, comedy, artwork, he actually came up with that independently as well. So I'll credit him for coming up with that idea as well. But just similarly, as opposed to like, instead of wishing for an enemy to suffer,
right,
like, why not wish for them to like learn, atone, seek forgiveness and accountability, and come to because also, like, I know personally, like, I haven't led a flawless life. I haven't almost none of us.
Well, actually, I want to pause you just because I'm fascinated, right, Mike? Are you have you always been this, I'm going to say, positive and consciously positive, or is this something that you've worked on? Because I'm very impressed, truly.
I appreciate it. I for sure have not always been this way. A specific example that I can point to is when I was just starting out in comedy, maybe a couple years in. Do you know Josh Gondelman?
A field which is well known for emotional stability and upbeat attitudes. Yeah, I think I've met Josh a couple times, but I don't know him. I know of him. He was running for Last Week Tonight, wasn't he?
He was. Now he's this in Miro. And he's a delightful human. In fact, when we started, like when he, first came on the scene and got to know people, like, he is the nicest. Mm-hmm. And
I've heard
to the point that when I first, like, we had here's an interaction we had once where I sat down and he sat down next to me at, like, in the audience at a show or before or after, and he was like, "How are you?" And it was like very friendly and warm, and I was kind of suspicious, I was like, so friendly, like, is that real?
What is this guy selling? Is he going to convert me to something?
And so I was like, I'm fine. You? And he was like, great, thanks for asking. And I'm like, I did like the bare minimum. And because I couldn't imagine how a person could be that nice, because I, at that point, wasn't that nice. I was like, I thought of myself as nice. I'm like, but it's sort of like do you know this joke of if you're Jewish, like, if for the people who are more Jewish than you're like, they are bananas. But for the people who are less Jewish than you're like, they're not even Jewish. And so, like, only the people who are your exact level are the ones that even make sense to be. Yeah. And so that was how I was with niceness. I was like, if you're not as nice as I am, like, well, you got to get it together. But if you're like nicer than I am, like, what are you doing? In high school, I was like on guard, and I think I learned that when you're a teenager, your ability to determine whether somebody's face is angry versus scared is less mature than when you're an adult. Like, teenagers, like, high schools are full of kids thinking that everyone's angry when everyone's really scared.
Yeah. And
so I was scared. And so when somebody was nice, like if a person was friendly or like held open a door or whatever it was, I was like, not suspicious, but just like, wow.
I am impressed. I will, independent of this episode, I'm going to hit you up for book recommendations. And,
sure.
Because whatever mental supplements you're taking right now, I would also like to have these supplements. They seem like a good thing. Well, I'll run through 2, maybe 3 more episodes and we can wrap it up. But I will bookend it with with Black Mirror, the titular reason for our talking.
Of course.
And unfortunately, I will have to focus on some of the negative elements of it because the show itself is oftentimes so negative.
I understand.
So to return to social media for a minute, I thought Nosedive was a fun episode. Hated in the Nation, I actually did really enjoy as well. That's the other big social media episode. That's the one where a hacker is able to take over robotic bees that are used to artificially pollinate flowers and things. And he writes a program where if someone writes hashtag death to insert name here, these bees will burrow into that person's skull and kill them. And this resets every day. And it takes them a while to figure out what's happening exactly. But the long and the short of it is that social media, Twitter, has the ability to select a person to murder every day. And I thought that was very prescient because I don't like mobs and I don't like hate. I'm anti-hate and I'm anti-mob. And I don't like the kind of social media lynching that takes place and live in terror of it because I know that, like, at some point I'm going to accidentally say something that will be taken out of context and then there'll be a firestorm. And I think a lot of people that are in public kind of feel that way, that they need to watch their step because something bad might happen that will absolutely, upend them and root them. So I thought that the commentary of that, of just kind of the social media pylon, was very good at capturing those negative emotions.
For sure. Have you read the book So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson?
I have not, but I'm aware of it, and it seems prescient. Did he go through all of this?
Yeah, he discusses like some specific cases, like the woman who, took off on a plane.
Oh, right. Has Justine landed?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he discusses those cases and sort of catches up with, where some of the people are now and like how it, perhaps, let's say, disproportionately impacted their lives and their livelihoods. And to us, to the public who are on the other side of it, on the side of the shaming, like how little it is for, one person to just hit one button or a like or a retweet or being like, oh yeah, that's not what I would do. Even that particular example, like, it's interesting because nobody, like, some people might be like, yes, the person they should lose their job for this, and then other people are like, no, like they should just be like a slap on the wrist, or they should just know that I don't like it. But it's beyond any one person's control under normal circumstances, and so like we are in society, I feel like, so far removed from so many of the consequences of our actions in totality, like especially when online comes into play.
I think the book you just referenced of So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I think that's very salient to the topic at hand. And the other one that I think parallels that, although it doesn't directly use social media, is the episode White Bear. So White Bear kind of starts off like, it seems like maybe it's a zombie episode or something, because this person wakes up, there's a bottle of pills in front of them. They don't remember why they're there. And they look out, there's a symbol on all of the monitors, and there's a bunch of people wandering around outside with cell phones that like seem very zombie-like, that are disengaged. And then she's told that some people just go psycho, and she now has to avoid these, psychopaths that have meat cleavers and bunny costumes and things. And they chase her, and it's terrifying. And at the end of the episode, the lights go up, and it turns out it is both a reality television program and an actual judicial sentence where this woman was involved with something bad that happened to a child, some kind of child murder death. She was an accessory to the crime, or perhaps did it herself. We don't know the exact things about it, but we do know that she was adjudicated as guilty of this, and the response from the courts was to, on a daily basis, wipe her memory, run her through this torturous regime again, and then wipe her memory and just ad nauseum do this while people watch for fun. And I think has that same sort of pylon effect of like, at what point are we merely expressing opprobrium? I think that's the right word. Which point are we just expressing opprobrium versus at which point are we deriving pleasure from cruelty? Are we finding an excuse to be cruel and then reveling in it? And
in reality, I believe I've read stories of people who are working, like, let's say, to end the death penalty. Like there are stories from even the families of victims, of murder victims, who don't want, and it's not a monolith, of course. I'm not speaking for everyone, but an article particularly that I read, referenced, studies, I believe, and some specific, at least anecdotal examples of a family who had lost someone. And then they're like, I don't want the person, even the murderer, I don't want the murderer to be killed because I know what it's like to lose a family member. And if they have family members, like, I don't want to put their family members even through this. Like, it won't bring the person back, and it will take another person away. It will take away, it takes, the thing they say, holding a grudge is like taking poison and then waiting for the other person to die. And the thing that I would add to that is what sometimes it can be is like being forgiving if possible. And this is, I can only do it for myself, and I'm not demanding it of anyone else because other people have had so many different experiences than me. But I've read from different people as well who have experienced losses, horrible suffering at the hands of ostensibly other people that then have gained from, like, forgiving isn't even necessarily about the other person. It's about for your own bet. It's like taking vitamins and hoping that the other person
to drag in a whole new religion. If you were to go into, say, like Eastern Orthodoxy, the word for forgiveness in Greek means to release. But it's not the at least according to sermons I heard, it's not the idea that you are releasing the person you're forgiving. Rather, you're releasing yourself from all of the negativity associated with that act.
For sure. Have you watched the show The Good Place?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I haven't finished it. I haven't seen the last season of it. But I have watched The Good Place and enjoyed it quite a lot. Yeah.
Boy, I'm excited for you. And I feel like it speaks to like sort of the flip side of the message of this particular Black Mirror episode, the White Bear, or what's the most recent one you mentioned?
No, White Bear's the one we were just talking about, where the lady's being terrorized and her mind is wiped as part of a judicial sentence.
Where, like, on a daily basis, like, it's so interesting to think about, because one of the reasons, like, there's so many issues with the criminal justice system that have become more and more apparent the more I've learned about them. And
there are some flaws, yes.
And like one of it, I aspire to like this Rumi quote, which, about like beyond the concepts of good and evil, there is a field, I'll meet you there. But even in the world that we live in, of course, there are horrors, there are innocent people suffering, there are quote unquote guilty people suffering more than they ought. There's more suffering piled upon suffering, but ostensibly, like, to be generous to the criminal justice system, the goal hopefully has to be justice. And the idea of justice, what does it mean? What do we want for people who've committed a crime? Part of it, at least, some of the three, when I learned about this in school, like the three reasons for imprisoning a person could be a deterrent, which I think statistically doesn't work in general. Like, it deters them from doing...
Certainly not with the death penalty. The death penalty has no statistical correlation with deterrence.
Then there's punishment, just like you did this thing, and so you deserve to have this bad thing happen to you. And three, rehabilitation, which seems like the most noble, the most actually like justice-oriented, justice, kindness, compassion, like fairness, equality. And so this episode of Black Mirror it's only retribution based. It's like there's no chance of learning because of the memory wipe.
100%. I agree with you 100%. And I agree with your take on criminal justice. Like my top priorities are, one, to keep innocent people safe, but then after that, to rehabilitate the prisoner, in part just to save tax money, because it's actually a lot more tax effective to give people counseling and GEDs than it is to throw a brick at them. And I would rather live in a society where, we're trying to rehabilitate people instead of punishing them. That just strikes me as a better thing. And I think you're absolutely right. In that episode, the person has no capacity to learn from her mistakes. She's literally being tortured ad nauseum in response to a crime that happened, and there is no capacity for her to do better. And I think it also asks the broad question of what do we do to ourselves when we inflict this on someone else? So, like, I feel strongly that I can see situations where violence is necessary. Like you have to stop a mugger, or someone's going to commit genocide. We have to go in and forcibly stop them. There are situations that violence I can find justified. There are lots of situations where passion and anger are justified. I have a very difficult time thinking of any situation in which taking pleasure in somebody else's pain in any way helps the situation or you as a person. I can't think of a situation where me enjoying the suffering of someone else, even if they deserved it, is going to make me happier or elevate me as a human being.
Yeah, I'll go a step further and say, I mean, I can understand why violence happens, but I also think that it's not one of the things that I talk about in the new album that I have coming out is like that I would rather be a get murdered person than a murder person. I would rather get murdered than choose to murder. And like that's an extreme way of putting it, like, which doesn't necessarily cover like what about in self-defense? Because if you kill someone in self-defense, that's not necessarily technically murdering them. But I do feel like even speaking of like from a distance, of course, maybe we can imagine a time when violence is the quote unquote not right thing, but better, like the lesser of
the
two evils,
least of two bad options. Yeah, I don't mean to glorify violence, merely that there could be situations which necessitate it.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, in a way, I think using the word necessitate or using the like that it is whatever the language is so powerful and important that like I think it's just important to have these conversations because if we if we don't, then we do like head further down the road towards becoming a society like in that episode, or like the society that we have where sometimes we do preemptively strike against, a country, a nation, a people, like killing innocent children, innocent, non-combatants, people who are like our people because they are people, like our people, like the idea of the us and them, like it's all us. And so it's the idea of like the fear, like, The Dark Knight was a great movie where I feel like they, in a nice and perhaps simplistic way, like, I don't know if you're familiar, like there's a scene where it's like, who are you going to kill, them or are they going to kill you? It's gonna be one of them. And, the answer is it doesn't gotta be. It doesn't have to be like, and in fact, I would rather, like, I understand there's all kinds of philosophical, questions like the trolley problem type things where it's like, okay, someone's going to die. Well, everyone's going to die. The question is, how are they going to die? When are they going to die? Who is going to make them die? And how are people living before that? And so like these are, valuable philosophical experiments to have, but I also think it's important to be like, well, you don't have to stop the mugger. You don't have to stop if you're like, if you could only stop the mugger with a shot to the head that will kill them, then maybe that's not the most proportional, like oh, violence was called for. And I mean, because that is thinking about like, well, we have to, like we don't, there's almost no have to, it's all get to and want to. And like I've had this discussion with my cousin once where he's like, what if somebody was like attacking your grandmother? Wouldn't you want to? And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying it would be easier, that I have all the right answers, that I would like live up to my standards, but certainly while I am imagining, why don't I imagine that the way forward, and if we all do, if we all at least think about the possibility of assuming that the other person might be scared and not angry, of assuming better intentions, like in a relationship with my girlfriend, like, I'm sometimes might be like, oh, I wonder, is she like, I know I've been with her for years and it's wonderful. And it's not always, I'm not always able to, like, if one of us is tired or hungry or something, be like, oh, it's not my favorite way to feel, but we always have an overarching, like underlying assumption and expectation of mutual care and positive intention for one at our best. And I think that's true for everyone. At our best, we want what's best for ourselves and others. And I think we do just sometimes disagree in the middle about the best way to accomplish those things.
Well put. All right. So final question for you. What did you find scariest in Black Mirror? Like which of the episodes struck a chord with you where you were like, that's spooky and I am alarmed by that? Great
question. There's 2 episodes that spring to mind. I don't know if I have the names, but I'll describe them.
Sure.
One is the John Hamm episode.
That's White Christmas, and that one is also, I agree. Please tell me why, but that's the one that scares me the most. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, first, it's so artful that, like, I don't want to, I understand. Please watch it. Yeah. Pause, watch it.
And John Hamm's just fantastic. He's such a good actor. He's such a good comedic actor, too.
And that, like, I think what they do in that episode is so beautiful and perfect, and like so truly like them. Like that was a like really, because it was like I think maybe longer than some of the episodes at the time. It was like it was a
Christmas special, which the British love to do. They love to like let a series stop and then revisit it 2 years later for like an hour-long Christmas special, and that's basically what they did as an interregnum between series, I think, or between seasons.
Yeah, and I remember, like, I feel like it had at least like sort of 3 mini stories within it.
Yeah.
And they, each of them, like on their own, were, kind of like a miniature Black Mirror episode that offered like the classic, question about ourselves and society, like the terrifying nature of like the person who had the personal Siri, like made from their own consciousness that then like existed in time for infinity.
Yeah.
Like infinity is itself like just at least at times, a frightening prospect.
Well, certainly if you were locked in a room and it was your job to, because that happens twice in that episode, right? We're introduced to the concept. I don't know that they use I think they call it a cookie, I could be wrong about that, but they introduce us to the concept that you can take an imprint of a person's brain and upload it to a hardware device, and that basically a duplicate of that person now lives in that device and can do something. And so the woman that you're referencing, seems to be a fairly well-to-do lady, decides to do this with her own mind, and her duplicate is put into like an egg timer that is Siri. It can control the toaster. It can do her schedule. It can wake her up in the morning with lights. And from her perspective, she now has a device that knows exactly how her life works and exactly how she likes things, and is tuning everything within her world that's connected to the Internet of Things to benefit her. Meanwhile, there is the duplicate of her that she created that's living this torturous, hellish existence, because it's basically solitary confinement in a white room with a very utilitarian computer panel, and the only thing she can do is make toast and these various things. And there seems to be no end in sight. There's no vacation. There's no death. The death would presumably be when the thing runs out of batteries, or when it is consciously shut down. And at the end of the episode, the even more terrifying prospect, the infinity prospect, because we learned that you can speed up the processing time of this, so that the subjective time for the homunculus living inside of this device is experiencing 3 months while we're experiencing 30 seconds. One of the characters is convicted of a crime through this kind of invasive technology, and the duplicate that they've created of him is just left to live in this solitary confinement, this cabin, and they just leave it on high speed forever and walk away. So at the very least, even if it's a long weekend and they come back in on Monday and they're like, you know what, turn it off. It's been thousands of years for this guy. It's terrifying, deeply terrifying.
And one thing that it's sort of, I don't know if it's heartening in a way, like, to think about the fiction of it to me, because here's something that, like, it seems like if that was possible, like whatever it is, like does the being, like, does the consciousness, the homunculus, like grow and change, or do they stay like the same copy of the consciousness of that person? Because like the person in real life will continue to, live and, have different experiences and grow and change. Will those transfer? Like my understanding is it seems like they wouldn't, that it would just be. So it's hard to even imagine, or maybe then my thought of it is like I think that Camus' interpretation of Sisyphus, as I understand it,
that's the myth of Sisyphus. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, is that Sisyphus would be happy doing what he was doing, because it's kind of it may be a Rorschach for what we're all doing is like, you wake up, you do something, you wake up, you do it again. Like maybe there are variations, but like that Sisyphus was pushing this rock up the hill with purpose. Like this is all he could do, all he had to do. Like, so at a certain point he might be like, well, this is my life. He's not like, oh man, I wish I was doing something better. Or if you look at Sisyphus and think that, maybe you wish you were doing something better. If I watched the episode again, I'm sure I would be able to revisit the terror that I felt. But like, I do feel differently, perhaps due to meditation, Buddhist studies, psychedelics, ayahuasca ceremonies. I've had different experiences that demonstrate to me that certainly my consciousness, my brain, my mind is always at least slightly different than it was a moment ago. Yeah. And so the fact that like it could never, it would be like, oh wow, like living forever, well, there's some benefit to that. Like, I was afraid of dying. Like, it's either both terror. It's win lose or lose win. You can look at it, be like, oh no, infinite torture. Well, at least I'm not dying. I had a song I wrote once, like sort of a comedy song, but the lyrics were, pain means you're alive, death means you're not in pain. So the only thing to fear is hell. But hell's not real, so we're all set. And now we can just start murdering. And there's a message to it somewhere. Who knows what I mean? But I think that especially even now it's possible to like infinitely delve into the terror of the infinite that I used to feel and can feel again if I want to. But I'm glad to be able to turn the timer off for myself. But yeah, that episode. The fact that those 3 stories were all by themselves, like separate, beautiful little not allegories, just whatever, stories. And then that they tied together in a way that was like the whole time the viewer doesn't know exactly what's happening. And at the end you do, it's like the exact thing that I wanted. I know exactly what's happening. Like they knew the whole time. They tied everything together and we're like, oh no. So it's just like, and I can flip it and be like, wow, it's like, it's really satisfying to be, hurt and scared so much.
That is indeed a positive takeaway from that, which I like. I guess the sci-fi enthusiast in me asks, would I? So like the techno optimism one that we talked about earlier, San Junipero, where there's a world in which you can upload yourself to an idyllic computer. For some reason, it's the 1980s, and for some reason, it's a beach town. But once you're there, you're experiencing no physical pain, and you can interact with other people that are in a similar situation. They are either dead and have been uploaded, or they are elderly and are vacationing there in effect. And over the course of the episode, there's a wonderful love affair that happens with a woman that had been deeply paralyzed for most of her life, but is able to experience life more fully in this environment, and a woman that had a family and everything, but they've died. She's old, and then she gets to be young again, and they fall in love, and it's a really uplifting episode. But I don't think I would be okay uploading my consciousness into one of those computers for fear that in the future at some point some person would like kidnap all of the personalities and put it in a hellish scenario until someone, someone who was able to buy them off. I don't think I would upload myself to an eternity that I did not know exactly what I was getting into. Or if there was like an eject button, like if it was built into your coding that you could at any time hit a red button and you would just dissolve, then great. But if it was like, let's hope that this is a good simulation that you're trapped in for thousands of years.
That makes sense to be afraid in that way. Well, the good news is it's not an option right now.
Right. Right now, all I can do is exercise and eat vegetables and try and prolong existence for a while. Yeah.
I do have one other one that I remember that really jumped out in the way that you asked, that hit me, that I still think about the ending sometimes. It's where a guy like goes to a company and there's like maybe a virtual reality kind of thing that he gets plugged into. And the thing that I remember specifically is like they're supposed to not have their phones on,
right, yeah.
But then he gets a call from his mom as he's like, entering the situation, and then like the whole simulated thing happens, and then at the very end he goes home, but we find out that the whole thing was still part of the simulation, mm-hmm. that because of the call to his mom from his mom, like messed up the system,
right? And
I just that turn at the end to be like, oh no, yeah. Oh God. Oh.
That episode kind of goes from bad to worse because I think it's Playtest, I believe, is the episode. It's a young man is visiting England and sleeps with a lady at a bar, and she's like, oh, you're going to X place tomorrow to check out their technology? Like, you should let me know about it because I report these kind of things. And he breaks the rules and makes a phone call, but he doesn't turn his phone off, or I can't remember exactly, but basically he breaks the rules in some capacity where they're like, don't have your phone off, and he just assumes it's wanting them to protect their IP, not knowing that there's any type of self-preservation element going on. And then once he's supposed to be testing out like a horror game, but the horror game goes from like, oh, this is scary, to like them coming in and going, no, this is really bad. You need to get out of here. Like there's something wrong with the program. Like, you're in very serious danger. And he eventually is able to escape, returns home only to find that his mother doesn't remember him because she also has Alzheimer's like his dad did, and then he dies. So it goes from like oh no, this is going poorly, to now real life is going poorly, to actually that wasn't even real life. You died before any of this happened. Now it's yeah. I mean, I suppose the takeaway from that episode is the sort of like, I'm going to cut corners because it momentarily benefits me. So I'm going to disregard these rules that we've agreed to.
And also it perfectly is like a microcosm of the larger macro message of Black Mirror, which is turn your phone off. Don't look at your phone. Don't have your phone be on. If your phone's on, you die.
Once again, Mike, what is the name of your comedy album that's come out?
It is called AKA, out May 8th, 2020.
Okay.
Available for pre-order a few weeks before that, depending when this is. But yeah, from May 8th, 2020 and beyond, AKA is my newest comedy album, and I appreciate your having me here to discuss it and everything we did.
That's the show. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Mike Kaplan, for coming on and being a ray of thoughtful sunshine in dark times, let alone to discuss a dark show. We'll see you next week. Until then, tally-ho!